So one of your non-negotiables, Jen, is clean fasting.
It is.
All right.
It
So
is.
so explain a little bit what that means because now there's all these products on the market that, are for intermittent fasters and
Isn't that
the
hilarious?
bulletproof coffee in the morning
Uh,
because that's, part of intermittent fasting. So what is that all about?
So when we're talking about the clean fast, we have three fasting goals. The number one fasting goal is keep your insulin low. And we do that by avoiding food. And also, we avoid taking in anything that our brain is going to perceive as food is coming in. So during the fast, you want to avoid anything that tastes like food, sweetness, fruity flavored, anything that your brain is going to think food is coming in. All right. So that's step one. Step two, we want to tap into our fat stores for fuel. So if you're taking in a lot of fat, that's the fat your body's going to burn. So do you want to, and this is your choice, would you rather burn the fat from your body or the fat from your coffee cup? It's totally up to you, but
Let's
I think
go.
we want to tap into our fat stores for fuel. And also, I do believe that if you're constantly drinking coffee with MCT oil or coffee with butter or coffee with, some other sort of fat source in there, your body is again, how I talked about being not being metabolically flexible. You've got to start learning how to tap into your fat stores. So if you're always taking it in, your body's going to get used to going there.
Right.
Now, the third fasting goal is we want to have increased autophagy.
Mhm.
So we want to avoid taking in protein. You don't want your insulin to be rising, so you can tap into your fat stores. You want to burn fat from your body, not fat from what you're taking in, and you want to make sure you're not taking in any source of protein. So during the clean fast, what can you have? Plain water.
Mhm.
Don't add anything to it. But Jen, can I add? No. But Jen, can I add? No.
Welcome back, friends. I'm your host, Sherry Shaban, and with each episode, I am honored to be your coach and guide in the journey to make peace with food, fall in love with fitness, and ultimately yourself. My intention in each episode is to help you release the old story of who you are and step into the one you're always meant to be. We'll challenge conventional diet and fitness culture and understand the importance of tuning out all the shoulds they tell us to do and tuning into our own inner wisdom instead. What you focus on, you create more of. Through these conversations, you'll shift your focus from what you're supposed to be doing to who you want to be, so that health and fitness and ease around food is not just what you do, but who you are. And if you find that this conversation resonates with you today, then I want to invite you to join our free Make Peace with Food Facebook community at myfoodfreedomlifestyle.com, where you can connect with me and my team directly and access all the free trainings and resources we have for you so you can regulate your nervous system and make peace with food. And then also remember to share this episode with someone who you think needs to hear this today. The links are in the show notes. All right, now let's get into it. Hi, Jen. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
So am I. I've been listening to your books on audio. I'm all about the Audible. And so I've had your voice in my ear for so long. And I feel like I've already known you. Like I know everything about your family and your past and your stories. And, you've written what I believe to be some of the most influential, impactful books on intermittent fasting. And I know you've helped so many people onto their journey. So please share your story. How did you get into that?
Well, thank you so much for all of that. I just, I spoke from the heart in all of my books and I wrote with my voice. And so if you feel like you know me, you do.
And you're funny too, many times.
well,
Really.
well, I decided I wanted to keep my personality through the book and have it be more fun instead of just dry. So, we don't want to read another dry book about health, right?
100%.
So, I'm 52 and I'm a retired school teacher. So I taught elementary school for 28 years. So people might be thinking, what, how is an elementary school teacher writing books on health and wellness? What in the world? But I want to go back in time. I was someone struggling with my weight. And probably like so many of your listeners, I struggled for so long. I even struggled with my weight before I struggled with my weight because I was raised by a mother who was a dance teacher and very critical of her own body all the time. And, we in our family, the women have thighs, we have cellulite. It's how we're built, it's how she was built. So as soon as I hit puberty, I started hearing, now you've got to be careful. You've got to watch out, that sort of thing. But I had a little cellulite, but I was still very slim. So I'm like, whatever. But I started to get that little voice inside of my head. And then I went off to college and gained the freshman 15 and came home from college. And I remember I was at a dance class and somebody in the class said, "What happened to you?" And I was like, ah. And there became the first time I needed to diet. And so I was counting calories like everyone was doing. This was the 80s. And so I started counting calories, but I still didn't pay much attention to it during the college school year. I would diet over the summer and then go back for the school year. But, as time went on, I just kept, yo-yoing back and forth. I never got too heavy. You never got too slim, although there was a time with the low fat diets of the early 90s that I looked a little emaciated and not very good. But the yo-yo continued. I jumped on every diet bandwagon when I felt like I needed to, until it got to the point that eventually I yo-yoed myself right up to 210 pounds. So I just skipped a lot of years in between, but in between there, I had kids and my boys were little. And then now it's 2014 and I'm weighing 210 pounds. And I was like, why is this so hard for me? Why am I yo-yoing, doing these drastic diets, the diet pills from the doctor, the HCG diet with shots from the doctor? I was like, everything I kept trying was like crazier than the thing before, because it felt like I was on this crazy train of diets. And so I had actually heard about intermittent fasting probably around 2009, and I'd started dabbling in it. We didn't understand back then. I mean, maybe some people did, but the vast majority of people, including all of the few books that were published, there were a few that were like ebooks you could download or whatever. But there weren't any really mainstream books about intermittent fasting, but everyone talked about it as this is just a way to eat less. You're eating fewer calories. So that's what we thought intermittent fasting was. So from 2009 to 2014, I would dabble here and there, but I never gave my body time to adjust. I never saw any success. But suddenly, like I said, that 210 pounds, being obese, looking at myself in the pictures back from a family vacation, I was like, oh, you know what? I've really got to do something now. It's time to make a change. And that was the last time I started intermittent fasting back then in 2014. Got to my goal, lost my initial 75 pounds that I wanted to lose, and then went on to lose another 5 pounds over time. But I've been maintaining within this goal range since 2015. So I just hit my 7 years of maintaining, which is shocking in the world of, quote, diets. Although I'll talk about why intermittent fasting is not a diet at all. They say you can't maintain. They say maintenance is the hardest part. And here I am for the first time. I figured it out recently. The only time in my entire life from birth to now, this 7-year period is the only period of time where I maintained my weight. Because for a lot of those years I was growing. I was a kid. Right. I certainly wasn't maintaining my weight, but there was no time from the time that I hit my adult size until 2015, right. No time that I maintained my size season after season after season. Like most people, I had tubs, skinny clothes, medium clothes, fatter clothes, don't get above these clothes, right? And then I would get to those clothes. They're like the alarm clothes. And I'm like, oh no, I'm in the biggest box. And I would go back down the tubs, and then I'd go back up the tubs. But for the first time, I don't have any tubs. I have, these are for next season. These are for this season. That's it. It's just amazing.
Yeah. And it sounds like, Jen, you've created a lifestyle, right? And that's why you've been able to maintain. But coming back to some of the things that you shared, and I think for many listeners that are struggling with their quote unquote diet or finding that lifestyle, why is it that we are constantly yo-yoing back and forth? And why is it that we're constantly struggling with that same sort of problem, I want to say, and not really finding the solution?
There are so many reasons that I could talk about here. Number one is toxic diet culture. Mm-hmm. You're standing in line at the grocery store, and there's that, tabloid magazine right there at the checkout stand. We're recording this, it's March. Right. There might be one there right now that says something crazy like lose 100 pounds by Memorial Day or something like that. Nonsense, because people have this toxic diet culture has given us the idea that we're supposed to lose weight dramatically and quickly. And it's just by making this one simple tweak. No, that's not how it works. And we also think that diets are something you start and stop. You use the word lifestyle. And that is absolutely what intermittent fasting is. Sometimes, someone will come into my community and they'll say something, well, I was talking to a friend and she said I shouldn't do intermittent fasting because as soon as I quit, the weight will all come back on. I'm like, your friend is not wrong. You're not going to quit though. Right. That's the thing about intermittent fasting. It's very much a lifestyle and you keep doing it. It's a very healthy way to live. One of the renowned experts on intermittent fasting in the world, Dr. Mark Mattson, he's a research scientist from Johns Hopkins, and he just wrote a book about intermittent fasting that came out in February of this year. But I had the pleasure to interview him recently for my podcast, Intermittent Fasting Stories. That one will come out in a couple months. But he has been doing intermittent fasting since the 80s.
Wow.
I know. So, I mean, he's a neurological researcher, expert on the brain and diseases of aging and how that affects the brain. And based on his research early on, he's like, you know what? This is great for the brain. I'm going to do it. So, he lives the lifestyle not as a weight loss approach, but as a way to stay healthy. It's linked with longevity and so many positive health benefits. So I like to call intermittent fasting the health plan with the side effect of weight loss. Because that's really how I look at it now. I don't do intermittent fasting to lose weight. Well, I don't need to lose weight. Thank goodness. It does help me maintain my weight, which is amazing. But if someone said you could maintain your weight without intermittent fasting, you would just have to do this, I'd be like, no, thank you. I'm not interested because I love the way I feel thanks to intermittent fasting. Right. It's just a great lifestyle. And I would never want to go back to eating all day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it seems that there's this sort of stepping into this mindset around, well, this is not temporary. I need to change things permanently in order for me to continue to see results. It's just like weeding our garden, right? Or cleaning the house. You can't just do it once, but you have to find a way where it also becomes sustainable. And I think that's the thing with many diets, right? As you mentioned, they promise these massive results in short amounts of time, or you should look a certain way because it's almost bikini season, right?
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right. But the goal is always very short term. Okay, once I'm done with that vacation and I'm off the beach, then it doesn't really matter anymore. And I think that's where a lot of us get lost is this, okay, I only have to do this up until this day and then I can go back and eat whatever I want. Right.
And there's that yo-yo again. I mean, and that's just one of the reasons why it's such a challenge in this modern culture, but so many things we've been lied to about basically how the body works and how to lose weight. And we've just been given such bad information. I mean, you could say we've been lied to, or you could say that people just are mistaken and they're wrong. But, so many of the things that we have internalized as, true, and these truths like calories in, calories out, eat less, move more. It doesn't matter what your calories are, all calories are created equal. Food is food. If you're not succeeding and you're counting your calories, then you must be lying. Or you're bad at counting calories. You're doing it wrong. If you're failing, it's because you're doing it wrong. So we've just heard all these things. Like when I was 210 pounds and when I was trying all those diets and couldn't maintain, I felt like something was wrong with me, but really something was wrong with the advice that I'd been given.
Yes. And that's the thing is you talk about these truths, but these truths coming from who, right? Who's telling me this, right?
Conventional wisdom.
Right. Like according to who. And the other thing too is feeling bad that it didn't work for me, right? Once we start to involve emotions in the process, I feel bad because I ate this, or I feel good because I ate that, or I feel bad because I put on 5 pounds, right? Then I think now we're just diving into a completely different animal. And it now doesn't even become about focusing on health, but now it's really that sort of focus on just the weight and that physical appearance.
And blaming ourselves. And we're blaming ourselves because, maybe your doctor said that can't be true. You couldn't have only eaten 1,000 calories a day. If you'd eaten 1,000 calories a day, you would be losing weight. So clearly you're not telling me the truth. And then you're like, what's happening? And then you feel like a failure and like there's something wrong with you, when really your body is working the way it's working for a reason. And it's a matter of figuring out the reason.
Yeah. And that's really, really important. We are bio-individual and our response to food is completely different, right? And even our preference to food and just how do we create satiety around certain foods? We need to tap into those signals that the body's giving us and then find what works best for us and not what works best for someone else, right? And we're oftentimes doing that. So-and-so had success on this diet or so-and-so is doing that. And so that must work for me. And when I try it and it doesn't work for me, then I feel like I failed.
I feel like all diet books that are written through with a point of view as far as like what you're supposed to eat, that's the diet that worked for that person that wrote the book. And that, like, I kind of figured this out at one point once I started learning about bio-individuality. And because before that, it was so confusing. You could read a book about a low carb approach. And I mean, the science was there, it backed it up, made such sense. Yeah. Then you try it and you're like, why am I gaining weight? Why do I feel so bad? And then on the flip side, a book about low fat eating, the science was there. Yeah, it looks so good. But yet some people don't do well on those diets. I actually did do well on low fat diets. I lost a whole lot of weight on those. But the science is so compelling. You read the low carb book and you're like, how did I possibly lose weight on a low fat diet if all this part is true or if this is true? But it just turns out that people writing those diet books, that's what felt best for their body.
Right, right. Yeah, and that's definitely something you continuously bring up in the books, is that just remember that whatever works for one person does not necessarily work for us, right? And our goal is to discover that. So
Yeah.
one of the things that you say many times as well, and you just mentioned this earlier, is that intermittent fasting is a health plan with the side effect of releasing weight if you have that weight
Right.
to release. So can we tap into that a little bit more?
Yeah. There's so many health benefits to intermittent fasting. Um, the shift about intermittent fasting for weight loss versus health really happened for the most part. I mean, it started happening in 2016 when we learned about autophagy. Autophagy, I'm getting tongue tied. Autophagy is our body's recycling system, and it's upregulated by many things that we do: exercise, drinking coffee, lots of things, but fasting upregulates autophagy as well. So we started hearing about that in 2016 and that it was linked to fasting. So that was great. But then in December of 2019, that was when Dr. Mark Mattson released a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine about the health benefits of intermittent fasting. And it turns out the rumor I heard was true because he confirmed it for me. He was asked to write that article because doctors had been asking for information. Patients were coming in. So this is 2019. Patients are coming in to doctors all around America and asking about intermittent fasting. And the doctors were like, I don't really know what to tell them. I need a resource. So the New England Journal of Medicine asked Mark Mattson to write this article, and he did. And it laid out, I mean, we're talking about, like anti-cancer, good for your heart, good for your brain, lowers inflammation, great for, if you're diabetic, you can reverse diabetes. I mean, all these amazing health benefits. And the reason that was such an important turning point, I was managing Facebook groups at that point. I've since left Facebook, but we had questions that people could answer to join the group, like, why are you interested in intermittent fasting? And prior to that, probably 99% of the answers were, I want to lose weight. I want to lose weight. I want to lose weight. That was the motivation. I mean, I came for the weight loss, stuck around for the health benefits, but people were coming to lose weight. But suddenly, after that, I mean, it got a lot of publicity in the news. It was on all the morning shows, all the evening shows. They were talking about this New England Journal of Medicine article. And all of a sudden, people were coming in saying, I want to be healthy. I want to be healthy. And that's really when we started focusing more on the health benefits, because there they all were. Dr. Mattson did the hard work of, combing the literature and pulling together all of the health benefits in one place, all the articles that talked about, what was happening and how it was good for us. And so it was out there for the doctors to have as a resource, but it just really turned the tide that day. Honestly, I can't think of a healthier way for adult humans to live unless you're pregnant, breastfeeding, underweight, that sort of thing. Or if you have an eating disorder and you may not want to jump into fasting without your counselor. And I'm not saying no one with a history of an eating disorder could not be successful with fasting, but you want to do that with guidance.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think every adult is going to find health improvements with intermittent fasting.
Yeah, definitely. And, some of the benefits that you had mentioned, I mean, even for a person who, whose main goal is not to release weight. I mean, we're talking
Right.
about increasing lean body mass. We're talking
Yeah.
about brain function, even just gut health and
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
balancing out our hormones as well. So one of the things that you talk a lot about as well in sort of your books and several times is just really finding the pattern that works best
Mhm.
for you, right? And I think, again, coming away from diet culture, that there's no correct eating window. And that's oftentimes the questions that we get, right? Well, what should the eating window
Oh
be?
yeah.
Right. And
It's true. They want to know. I mean, and back to the food, people want to know what they should eat as well. Yesterday in my community, someone made a comment and they're like, is there a snack list somewhere of snacks we should be eating? I'm like, no, we're not going to give you that. You've got to figure out what to eat. And the same is true with your eating window and your fasting schedule. And it depends on so many factors, so many things as to what is going to be the ideal time for you to eat, how long your eating window should be, what you're going to eat within it, how many times you're going to eat within it. I mean, there's some people who have a 5-hour window that like to graze all the way through and it works perfectly for them. Other people like to open with a big meal and then later have a little snack to close. I'm the opposite. I like to have a snack. Later, I have a pretty big meal. My husband, he has about an 8-hour window. He never needed to lose a pound. He opens with lunch, then he doesn't eat again until dinner. Well, he eats like at 5 p.m. It's really kind of hilarious. He eats lunch, then he doesn't eat again until 5. And I knew he came home from work and then had a little snack after 5, but I didn't know he was quite so regimented till we were out of town recently and it was 4:45 or something. And I'm like, I just made this cheese plate. He's like, I can't eat that. It's not 5. I'm like, what are you talking? He does not eat again until 5, but he's found something that works for him and what he likes. And, he never needed to lose weight, but he found just by not having breakfast, he has a more productive morning and he feels better.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so important. And I think flexibility and adaptability is extremely important because, again, shifting away from diet culture, this is what works for me. This is what serves my goals. And not to get into the we should be, because I don't really like those words too much, but we are made to go without food for
Yeah, we are.
prolonged amounts of time, right? And we don't do that because we're in our culture, wake up, eat breakfast, and then snack all
Yeah.
day. Make sure you never go hungry. Don't ever allow yourself to be hungry. And so we have almost this phobia of ever becoming hungry, but we are designed to be able to go through long periods without food, right?
Yeah. The term is metabolic flexibility.
That's it.
And we're designed to be metabolically flexible. Babies are born with the ability to, we're born with the ability to be metabolically flexible throughout our lives and switch our fuel sources, but we start eating all the time, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks in between, and we lose that ability. So we become sugar burners. That's it. You have to continue to put in the fuel all day long. So you're constantly in the fed state. Even if you're doing, I said sugar burner, you're like, well, not me. I'm doing keto. I eat, keto style. I mean, I don't eat keto style. I'm just referring to like a mythical person who might be saying that. I eat lots of carbs. But someone who's keto might say, well, I'm not a sugar burner. I'm a fat burner because I do keto. But even so, if you're eating all day from morning to evening, you're relying on being in the fed state and your energy is coming from what you're putting into your body. So we're meant to be metabolically flexible. So when we're eating, we can get our fuel source from the food that we're eating. But when we're fasting, our bodies can flip that metabolic switch. That's a term that I got from Dr. Mark Mattson, but your body flips that metabolic switch and it can tap into your fat stores for fuel. And so now you're fat adapted, like your friend doing keto, who's eating maybe a lot of fat and they're fat adapted that way. You're fat adapted with your body fat, which is really what it's there for. Because, we're storing all this body fat. When I was 210 pounds, I had all this body fat on my body. And when I would try to do a diet where I was eating breakfast, snack, lunch, dinner, all of that, I was so starving and hangry all the time because in between those tiny little diet meals, I wasn't metabolically flexible. So instead of, after eating my little low calorie breakfast, instead, when I would get hungry, my body could not shift into getting into my fat stores. Instead, I was just starving. So you have to teach your body to do it. And that's what the clean fast does for you.
Right. Yeah, we want to talk about the clean fast because
Yeah.
that's really important. But just to kind of segue into what you're sharing, appetite correction, right?
Yeah.
This is something that we see when we do intermittent fasting. So again, can you share a little bit more on that?
The phrase is brilliant. It was invented by Dr. Bert Hearing. He's one of the first people I followed with intermittent fasting. He had the Fast Five diet, he called it. I think it was the Fast Five diet and lifestyle. And he came up, his second book was called Appetite Correction. And it's the idea that, again, I talked about babies being born a certain way. Babies are born with appetite correction. It basically means that when you're hungry and when you aren't. I think back to my little baby boys, and I had my older son, Cal, he's about to turn 24. But when he was a baby, when he was done eating, he got these lips. He was not going to eat anymore. No matter how little you had given him, if he'd had enough, he was done. You couldn't force him to drink another drop. But when he was hungry, it didn't matter, if he was finished with the whole bottle and the doctor had said, give him this many ounces, and he'd eaten all those ounces, but he was still hungry. He wanted to eat more. He didn't know how many ounces that was. He knew he was still hungry. So his body let him know he needed more food. His body let him know when he had enough. And we train that out of our kids pretty early by encouraging them to eat one more bite, or, hey, it's lunchtime, you better eat now. And we, over time, disconnect from those hunger and satiety cues. Diet culture makes it even worse. I can remember all those years when right before I was 210 pounds, I was trying to be an intuitive eater. Mm-hmm. And I really, again, I read all the books, I bought into it. I was like, this sounds like such a better way to live. Just ask yourself, are you hungry? The problem was, the answer was always yes. Mm-hmm. When I asked myself back then at 210 pounds, are you hungry? The answer was yes. And then I would eat, because again, I was never tapping into my fat stores for fuel, and my satiety and hunger hormones were all out of whack. So thanks to intermittent fasting, they've gotten back in balance. Mm-hmm. So I now actually consider myself to be an intuitive eater within the intermittent fasting paradigm. Now, the intuitive eating community is not real big on intermittent fasting, but I wish they would listen to some of us that have tried it both ways. I could not be an intuitive eater prior to intermittent fasting. I was out of whack. Mm-hmm. Intermittent fasting has gotten me back in touch with my hunger and satiety signals. So now I very much am an intuitive eater, but within the intermittent fasting paradigm. Like, I know if I need to open my window early, my body tells me. I don't ever force it or white knuckle it or feel shaky or hangry. I never feel that way. If I did start to feel that way, I would eat. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, I can make it to my eating window with no struggle day to day. And in my eating window, when I eat, I know when I've had enough. I don't always listen to the appetite correction, because first you have to hear it. Mm-hmm. Then you have to listen. We've all had that moment where you hear that you've probably had enough, and then you eat a little bit more, and you're like, well, I really should have listened about 5 bites ago.
Regret for the next hour.
Exactly. But the first step is hearing it. The second step is listening to it. The third step is, when you don't, you file that away and think, okay, next time I'm going to be better. Because we all have those days where we overdo it. But, being able to reconnect with that feeling that you've had enough is a powerful thing.
Right, right. Yeah, I love how you combine the two, the intuitive eating with the intermittent fasting, because, and again, not to bash any group, because I think anyone who's there to help other people to create, joy and peace around food is really amazing. But that's the other thing about intuitive eating, is that oftentimes there are certain advocates of it that just promote eat as much as you want, and don't stop eating, and have whatever you want, and everything is okay. And there's a beauty in that, but there's also a harm in that, right? And
well, that was it. That's what got me to 210 pounds, because I was so weary of the diet culture. The promises of intuitive eating were, you will learn how to listen to your hunger and satiety signals. But I didn't. I never did. And, when we understand leptin a little bit more, leptin is the satiety hormone. And I'm sure probably most people listening have heard of insulin resistance. If you have chronic high levels of insulin all the time, and if you're overweight, you probably do, then you're probably insulin resistant. If you're pre-diabetic, you're definitely insulin resistant. If you're diabetic, unless you're type 1, that's a whole different animal. But if you're type 2 diabetic, you definitely have trouble with too much insulin in your body. And so leptin resistance is a similar problem. When you have insulin resistance, you have a ton of insulin, but your body isn't listening to it. Mm. And it's not functioning the way it's supposed to. With leptin resistant, I'm certain I was leptin resistant when I couldn't hear my body's signals, and all the wishing I could hear them didn't help until I corrected the leptin resistance, and fasting is what did that for me. So you're not going to be able to hear the signals if you've got that leptin resistance, because you've got tons of it. Your body just is no longer responding to it. I talked about it in my first book, Delay Don't Deny. Have you listened to that one?
I have.
That was the original. I self-published that one. But in that one, I talked about insulin resistance through the lens of a school teacher who yells at her class.
Yeah.
If you're yelling at and I knew teachers like that, all they did was yell at their class, and they yelled. And then by the end of the year, the kids had stopped listening because she yelled so much, right? The kids, they had yelling resistance. They're like, all she does is yell. We don't even listen anymore. Now, I never yelled at my class. That's not what I did. Except one day, if I did get a little loud, they were paying attention because that was so, they're like, oh no, Dr. Stevens is not happy. But your body is the same way. When something is, loud, there's too much of it, your body tunes it out. Insulin resistance, leptin resistance.
Right. So you mentioned that first we have to hear, right? Pick up the signs, the cues that we're getting full. Then we have to listen, and then we have to actually do something about it. So what are some cues, let's say, for a person who is struggling to determine when am I full, when am I hungry? Where can they start to pick up some of these cues and these signals that the body is giving them?
That's a great question. And we know that it takes a while for information to get from your stomach to your brain to let you know you've had enough. So if you're someone who's always struggling with knowing when to stop, and you're always going just past that point, you may want to start with baby steps, serve yourself less food than you think that you're going to want, with knowing that you can have more later. So serve yourself less than you think, eat the food, and then check in with yourself 20 minutes later after you finish. You can get up from the table, go about whatever you're going to do. And then 20 minutes later, say, am I still hungry, or have I had enough? And you have permission to go back and have more if you're legitimately still hungry. And again, in my eating window, sometimes people be like, my eating window closed, but I'm really, really hungry. What can I do? And some people are like, push through. And I'm like, no, eat. Hello. If you're legitimately hungry, you need to listen to that, and you need to eat some more. Don't let the fact that you closed your eating window boss you into that. Now, if every single day you're reopening your eating window, then you need to think, why am I opening my eating window every single day? Am I not eating enough? Does my window need to be shifted later? Am I not really hungry? I'm just bored. And you have to ask yourself those questions. But you really want to give your body time to check in with the feeling of, have I really had enough?
Yeah, and I definitely think that takes some time to adapt to, right? And again, coming back to this diet culture where things need to be quick, and I have to have quick results, and I have to pick up on this really quickly, otherwise I failed. I think it's really important to note that should a person decide to incorporate intermittent fasting into their lifestyle, is to have patience and grace with themselves, right? To slowly, first of all, be able to adapt to fasting, and then allow for appetite correction. And it really depends on the person, right? If for 20 or 30 years a person's been yo-yoing back and forth through different diet, well, that's going to look a little bit differently than a person who has other goals of maybe just 5 pounds because this last year or through COVID, things were rough, and now I just want to look for a way to maybe fine tune some of the way that I am living out my habits.
And if someone's been obese for 30 years, it's going to be a different process for your body, because you have a lot of healing to do. And it's going to take you longer to get to the point. We hear the saying, you got to lose weight to be healthy, right? It's really the opposite. You have to get healthy to lose the weight. So if you are someone who has struggled for years and years and years, and you've been overweight or obese, like I said, for decades, your body isn't going to bam, now we're fixed. It takes a long time. I like to think of it as walking into the forest on a path. If you're at the edge of the forest, you start walking into the forest. You're walking towards the forest, you get deeper and deeper into the forest, right? If you've been walking in for a long time, you're pretty far into the forest. And now you're like, okay, I'm going to go home. You have to walk back out of that same forest that you just walked through. And it takes time to get back out, just like it took you time to get there. So our bodies don't respond to quick fixes. You're going to start to get healthier the minute you start doing intermittent fasting. It's going to help, but it's going to be quite a process. In Fast, Feast, Repeat, which was my technically my third book, but my first traditional published book, I have something in there called the 28-day fast start, because I want people to understand, you've got to let your body adjust first. That's what the 28 days are for. And I can remember when it was, we were still in the stages of planning and writing and all of that and thinking about it coming out. And my literary agent said, okay, now we've got to start marketing this book. What are we going to say? How many pounds should someone expect to lose in those first 28 days? And I said, none. And you might even gain weight. And they're like, oh, we can't use that. I'm like, but it's the truth. I'm not going to sell you a book that makes claims that are unrealistic. It's not very sexy to tell somebody, buy my book and read about intermittent fasting. And after the first 28 days, you might actually have gained some weight.
Right.
Surprise. No. But, during the adjustment phase, you're definitely not, cued into your hunger and satiety signals. And in fact, you're probably going to be so hungry when you open your eating window because your body hasn't learned how to tap into your fat stores very well yet because you're not metabolically flexible on day one. Mm-hmm. It takes 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, depending on how far into that forest you were. It might be a while before you're metabolically flexible and you're not tapping into your fat stores for fuel. So during the fast, you might not be well fueled. You open your eating window and suddenly you're like overeating and you're like, well, this isn't going to work. You're like, be patient, give it time. That same person wondering, how's this ever going to get better? All of a sudden, one day they're like, I only ate half of my dinner and then I was really full. What's happening? I'm like, appetite correction. There you go. You finally get there. But it's all about when your body is well fueled and that you got to flip that metabolic switch first.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love everything that you just said. And
well, good.
And especially just the part about just allowing yourself to adapt and just remembering that in order for us to release weight, we first have to become healthy, right? We have to recover our hormone balance and our gut microbiome and all of these other things that have been there for so many years. And it's another reminder that this is a fitness journey. And somebody who would meet you that would see so much success has no idea of, the last years of struggles, right? I think you shared that it's been 7 years now, you've been maintaining, right? And that's a long time. But before that, there were many, many, many diets and many years of struggle. And now you are where you are because it has been a journey.
It has been a journey. And I'm actually grateful for the opportunity to be obese, which might sound crazy, but I'm really glad that I went through it. I couldn't paint my toenails. I remember when I was pregnant with my second child and my belly was huge and I couldn't paint my toenails and I was crying. And then my husband painted my toenails and that was sweet. But then when I was obese, I couldn't paint my toenails again because my belly was in the way. I mean, I couldn't look down and see like all my parts down there. I mean, women who have had the big belly and pregnancy was the same with being obese. And I couldn't wrap the towel around my body. I couldn't get up and down off the floor. It's just when you have a body that doesn't feel like your own but you're struggling with it and you're trying the best you can. So anybody who's listening that's been struggling, I get it. You don't feel like yourself and you feel like, what is this body that I'm in? But you really can begin today and help your body to get healthier over time.
Yeah. And your first sort of message to people who are wanting to get into intermittent fasting is delay, don't deny. And I think that's what's really important is that's your first step. Before you start thinking about, okay, I'm going to switch to whole foods and then I'm going to stop eating this and I'm going to remove all of these things. Just get into that place where you're creating that structure for yourself and then slowly allow things to progress. Because again, this is a lifelong journey. It's not something that will ever end. We're always learning and we're always learning about our body and our body's constantly adapting to everything in our environment, whether that's stress or age or any of these things or an injury, right? And so it's just learning to respect your body where it's at and then slowly allow it to adapt through.
Absolutely. And with foods, we know, I talked about those different diet books, the low carb diet book, the low fat diet book, and how they were also different and all the other diet books. But when you really start looking at all those different diet books and what they recommend, probably 99% of them are focusing on real foods.
Right.
Like the low fat diet book that I read from 1991 or whenever, if you read it again today, that same book didn't say eat SnackWells and SpaghettiOs that are fat free. They said eat real food, have it be low fat, and the same with the low carb people, eat real food, just have it be low carb. And then everything in the middle, whether it's paleo or whatever. eating real food really is the winning strategy because food is information. Food nourishes our bodies. Our bodies know what to do with real food, and ultra processed food is not going to nourish us our best. However, that being said, when you're starting with intermittent fasting for that first 28 days, I don't want you to change how you're eating during that first 28 days. Because we've all done the thing where we throw everything out and start something and everything is brand new and we're excited. We're going to eat different. We're going to fast. And then you crash and burn because it's too much at once. So, however you've been eating, when you start intermittent fasting, keep doing that. If you've been keto and now you're going to start intermittent fasting, keep doing that. Right. If you've been eating the standard American diet, keep doing that. And your one goal during the 28-day fast start is to let your body adjust to intermittent fasting. And now you can listen to your body during that time and say, I really don't want to eat this McDonald's cheeseburger. I'd rather have, whatever. And you can make those sorts of changes, but don't force it. Mm-hmm. Let your body guide you. I eat completely differently now in 2022 than I did in 2014. And it's not because, I felt like I had to, or I should, or it's because my body eventually guided me to want to eat more nutrients, because our bodies don't count calories, they count nutrients. And eventually when you're tuned back in, you start to hear and you start to listen. You're like, man, those Brussels sprouts look delicious.
Yeah, that's it. Right. So one of your non-negotiables, Jen, is clean fasting.
It is. All right, it is.
So explain a little bit what that means, because now there's all these products on the market that, are for intermittent fasters, and
isn't that hilarious?
Bulletproof coffee in the morning, because that's, part of intermittent fasting. So what is that all about?
Well, I started off just like everybody else. We thought it was all about calories in, calories out. And then the obesity code came out in 2016, Dr. Jason Fung's book. And I read the obesity code and I learned so very much. And that is where I learned about insulin and insulin's role in whether you're gaining fat or able to tap into your fat stores. Basically, if you have chronic high levels of insulin all the time, hyperinsulinemia, insulin is anti-lipolytic, meaning you can't tap into your fat stores very well when insulin is really high. So you want to keep your insulin as low as possible. And what does that? Nothing in the world does that better than fasting, because insulin, the purpose of insulin is when we eat, our body is supposed to release insulin to help our body, store, clear out our blood sugar, store things away. It's a storage hormone. But if you didn't have insulin, your blood sugar could just go up and to dangerous levels, but instead the insulin lowers it, because we know that through the paradigm of diabetes. And so, someone with type 1 diabetes doesn't make insulin, so they have to inject insulin. I actually have a diabetic cat. We have to give him insulin twice a day. He's not making the right amount of insulin. You need insulin. But what you don't want is chronic high levels of insulin all the time. So eating causes your body to release insulin. So you might say, well, that's super easy. I just won't eat during the fast. But eating is not the only thing that causes your body to release insulin. So when we're talking about the clean fast, we have 3 fasting goals. The number 1 fasting goal is keep your insulin low. And we do that by avoiding food. And also we avoid taking in anything that our brain is going to perceive as food is coming in, especially sweet things. And that is where, the diet soda industry and the artificial sweetener industry and all these flavored waters that we're drinking all the time, these water drop things we put in, the water enhancers, that is where those things are so very sneaky, because we have something called the cephalic phase insulin response, and that's our brain. And we taste the sweetness coming in, or whatever it is, the fruity flavored water, the lemon in your water, you taste that coming in, your brain says, I know what this is, because in nature, anything sweet or fruity or food flavored, cinnamon, all of those things, your brain says, there's going to be something sweet. There's going to be some blood glucose rising that goes along with this, except you're having 0 calories, but your brain doesn't know that. So your pancreas pumps out some insulin to deal with this, glucose load that never shows up. That actually leads to some more metabolic confusion, but it keeps your insulin high. So during the fast, you want to avoid anything that tastes like food, sweetness, fruity flavored, anything that your brain is going to think food is coming in. All right. So that's step one. Step two, we want to tap into our fat stores for fuel. I hinted about this earlier. You might have a friend who's doing the keto diet and they're fat adapted from the fat that they're taking in. So if you're taking in a lot of fat, that's the fat your body's going to burn. So do you want to, and this is your choice, would you rather burn the fat from your body or the fat from your coffee cup? It's totally up to you, but I think we want to tap into our fat stores for fuel. And also, I do believe that if you're constantly drinking coffee with MCT oil or coffee with butter or coffee with, some other sort of fat source in there, your body is again, how I talked about not being metabolically flexible. You've got to start learning how to tap into your fat stores. So if you're always taking it in, your body's going to get used to going there. Right. And instead of really, okay, I guess I better go to my fat stores for this. So you might feel great. You might have heard, well, if I drink this MCT oil in my coffee, I'm going to have so much more energy. Well, guess where that energy just came from? Your coffee cup, literally. Right. So anybody who thinks that is helping you to fast, I promise you, once you learn to flip the metabolic switch and your body's tapping into your fat stores, you're going to feel so much better. Now, the third fasting goal is we want to have increased autophagy. So we want to avoid taking in protein. So where would we find protein? Anything like bone broth. Some people talk about, well, it's just bone broth. It's not a problem. It's good for you, but it's not fasting. You're not going to have increased autophagy if you're taking that in. And you're also going to be a lot hungrier. We think these things make it better. They actually make it harder. So you don't want your insulin to be rising. So you can tap into your fat stores. You want to burn fat from your body, not fat from, what you're taking in. And you want to make sure you're not taking in any source of protein. So during the clean fast, what can you have? Plain water. Don't add anything to it. But Jen, can I add? No. Jen, can I add? No, you can put in a few sprinkles of salt if you want to. Salt is a mineral. It does not break the fast, but that would be it. You can have plain sparkling water, no flavors added. Just try to find one of those that when you're out shopping, I was at Starbucks recently and I was like, I just want to have, a plain Perrier and all they had was flavored. And I'm like, never mind. But you can have black coffee. Don't add anything to it. All those magical creamer things that claim to be one. No, you can't have any of those. You don't want to add anything to your coffee. And you might say, well, but I watched a YouTube video, Jen. And in that video, the guy said you could put in 50 calories of cream. It will not break your fast if it's under 50 calories. What that's going to do is it's going to make you starving. Yes. And also, let's think about cream and the idea of that not breaking the fast. What is cream? Well, it's dairy. What is dairy? It came from the cow. It's nature's perfect food for building a mammal baby. So if it's okay to have cream, is that baby cow fasting? No. Babies have milk at the time of their life when they are growing their body the fastest. So does that sound like fasting or does it sound like eating? Exactly. And so you're only hurting your own progress. So I have something called the Clean Fast Challenge I talk about in Fast Feast Repeat. Give yourself a month. If you've been fasting before, and I talked about how I read the obesity code and suddenly realized, oh my gosh, I should stop putting stevia in my coffee. I'd already lost 75 pounds by that point. Right. And I thought I was doing fine, but I was really white knuckling it every day. Once I switched to the clean fast and started just drinking my coffee black, suddenly it wasn't as hard. Like if you'd have asked me before the obesity code, I'd have said, oh no, it's fine. Chewing gum works for me. Putting stevia in my coffee works for me. It works for me. I mean, I'd lost the weight, but I was starving and I didn't even realize how hard the fast was. When I got rid of all of that, the fast became so much easier. And then I went on to lose more weight and it made such a huge difference. So anyone who doesn't believe me, who thinks you're doing fine, who thinks you need the hot milkshake, try it my way. Just give yourself a month. Yeah. And I bet you won't go back.
Wow, that's so great, Jen. I've enjoyed speaking to you so much today. There's so much value here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode. Whether you're already on your wellness journey or just getting started, we're in this together. If this has resonated with you today, I want to invite you to subscribe to the show so you never miss a beat. And if you know someone who could benefit from this conversation, then please share this episode with them. Let's work together to help as many people as possible make peace with food and fall in love with fitness. And also, don't forget to visit myfoodfreedomlifestyle.com to join the free Facebook group for more resources. Remember, you are an inspiration. I can't wait to hear your story. See you next time.